Humanitarian logistics is mainly about this figure you are seeing here, this image you are seeing here. This is the main issue we are discussing in humanitarian logistics. This is a route in Japan after the some people called it the Fukushima earthquake. It happened on, I think, the 11th of March 2000 or the 14th of March, something like that, 2011. You see, the road is totally damaged due to the earthquake. And here, this is the road after it's being repaired. Can you imagine the time between these two images is only how many days do you imagine? The time between these two images. The time between these two images is only 8 days. In 8 days, they were able to repair the road. The road is totally destructed, يعني as if it was bombed by an air raid or something like that. يعني كأن غارة جوية جت دمرته بالكامل. They were able to repair it in 8 days. What that means? They were able to transport material, equipment, and people, workers and engineers in 8 days. And they were able to repair the road in the 8 days. The main challenge here, it's not the repair itself. The repair itself, okay, it can be done in 8 days. The main challenge here, the main challenge here is how come you can transport all these things in 8 days? This is the main challenge you are facing here. It's not about the it's not about the uh, repair or the engineers how they repaired. They worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 8 days or whatever. But how you are able to transfer or to transport all this raw material and where you stored it while the repair is being done, to transport and to store its logistics activities. It's essential during disaster. If roads or bridges are collapsed, like you are seeing in this image, is to repair them very, very quickly, because you are going to transfer the goods, all goods, you are going to transfer them by roads. A good amount of material to be transferred to those who are in need is to transfer them by road transfer or by road transport. يعني تمام. طيب, these two images are 1 year apart. And these two images, the time between these two images is 1 year. When the earthquake happened, it happened in the sea or in the ocean. When earthquake happen deep in the ocean or in the sea, they cause what we know as tsunami. The tsunami, it's a gigantic wave coming from the sea, flooding many areas. As you see here, if we look at this image, you'll find طبعا this is a warehouse. Water took all the cars here and all this stuff. The water damaged all this stuff. You'll find the water get some of the boats from the sea into the parking of the warehouse. And the roads are flooded here. Everything is flooded. This is 1 year later, how everything restored, how everything returned working as normal. This is also the work of humanitarian logistics. In humanitarian logistics, you are not only shipping material and good to help people in need, you are shipping material and good to help the community to restore its life as it was prior to the disaster. انت لازم بيكون في دماغك كمان ازاي هتساعد الكوميونتي انه يسترد حياته كما كانت قبل الايه الديزاستر. هو ده الفكرة. In humanitarian logistics, we have two types of need, as we are going to discuss many times later. We have what we called it the instant need to help the people who are affected by the disaster, and to have what we called it a recovery need to help the people to recover their previous status of living. Both have different logistical requirements. The instant need have logistical requirement, maybe differ than the other the recovery needs. Actually, these four images, I think they were very informative about what the challenge we are facing in humanitarian logistics, what we want to do in humanitarian logistics. So I think by starting with these four images, we can start to know more about humanitarian logistics. First, we are going to discuss the word itself, the word humanitarian. What's meant by humanitarian? Humanitarian means this from dictionary concerned with or seeking to promote human welfare. Human welfare is we mean by human welfare that the humans have better life. welfare اللي هو بالعربي الرخاء. Human welfare means that you are if I said that you are a humanitarian person, that means you are concerned with promoting mean increasing or improving the human welfare. You are concerned with humans to have a better life. You are in the search of how humans can have a better life. This is what meant by humanitarian. Another definition or another meaning in this, I think, was coming from the dictionary. The second one is a definition, a person who is involved or connected with improving people's lives and reducing suffering. You are working to elevate suffering from people, from vulnerable people. The word vulnerability will be used a lot throughout the course, either in humanitarian logistics or in supply chain management. In both cases, it means the same meaning. It has the same meaning in both cases. Vulnerable means you are being threatened by external factors that may downgrade your business in case of supply chain or your life in case of humanitarian. So you are those people who are vulnerable have some threats about their style of living. You want to elevate these vulnerabilities because when you eliminate these vulnerabilities, you are reducing their suffering. They are live in more secure environment. They are living in more their life itself will be improved if you are able to reduce or eliminate the vulnerability they have, or at least you are reducing their suffering. Mainly, reducing suffering will be by eliminating vulnerability. For example, we go to a poor area, they suffer from having a very bad treatment or very bad medical care. So we establish a small clinic or a small hospital for free. We reduced the suffering by eliminating the vulnerability of being sick. Their life was threatened by being sick, because if they are sick, they will not be able to work, they will not be able to gain money to get food. By reducing this vulnerability, their life is improved. The word humanitarian, it's not related of having a sudden or of having a single or multiple disaster. It may be related with the economic status of the country. Countries, poor countries, countries with having a lot of people living under the poverty line. I think the poverty line now is $2 per day. Those who earn less than $2 per day are concerned to be living under the poverty line. $2 per day, and meaning about 30 Egyptian pounds. That's about around 900 or something Egyptian pounds per month, maybe less than 900, I think 800 something per month. Anyone whose earning is less than 800 something per month is under the poverty line, is considered to be under the poverty line. Usually those people have very low income, so they are suffering. Being humanitarian is helping these people. It's not helping these people by giving them only donations or giving them something to eat or so. No, no, no. This is not what the aim of humanitarian. By we are humanitarian, we are talking about how to eliminate the cause itself. For example, to have better jobs for them, to educate them or train them about some craftsmanship, يعني حرفة, so they can earn more. يعني we try to solve things from its roots, find the root cause of the thing and try to deal with it. This is what we mean about humanitarian. As we see, humanitarian, you are working to elevate suffering from people. You are working to improve people's life in general. طب what about humanitarian logistics؟ الأول حد عنده سؤال؟ any question؟ طيب. This is a rule about humanitarian logistics. These two people are the one who put this rule. Let's read this rule. According to humanitarian standards, local communities are estimated to be self-reliant only for 48 hours, after which humanitarian organization must be operational on ground. يعني ايه الكلام ده؟ تعال نشوف نقراه واحدة واحدة كده ونشوف هو الراجل هنا كان بيحاول يقول لنا ايه. الأول first there are some terminologies used here. We must understand very good these terminologies. The first is local communities. What's meant by local communities? As I said in the previous slide, if we have an area where which is very poor area, people are living are very poor in this area. This is the local community we are targeting. For example, if we have an area that happened, an earthquake occurred in this area, a city, people are, an earthquake occurred at a certain city. This city is the local community. Flood in a certain region may be something like governorate، يعني محافظة كاملة حصل فيها flooding. يبقى this governorate is the local community. A country suffer from drought, من جفاف. This country is the local community. تمام؟ يبقى local community, that's what we mean by local community. What we mean by humanitarian organization, it's any organization working in alleviating suffering from people. As we said in the previous slide, there is a definition about humanitarian. Any organization work, it's not a single person, but it's an organization. Any organization work to alleviate the suffering from people, this organization is a humanitarian organization. يبقى we have two sides here. One side, which is the recipient of the humanitarian aid, which is the local community, and the other side who is giving this giving this aid, which is the humanitarian organization. These are the first two members in this thing called humanitarian logistics we are going to identify later. يبقى عندي two sides. Local communities, they are the recipients of the aid, and the humanitarian organization who are responsible of transporting this aid to the local communities in need. طيب. You'll find usually we are talking about the terminology, the ground or the field. يعني sometimes the ground دي احنا بنقولها not ground، بنقولها يعني كلمة the ground دي sometimes we called it، اكتبها تحت كده، the field. The ground or the field is the area that we are going to find the local community living at it. It's the place which is in disaster. يعني في place كده هو ده اللي فيه disaster. This is the ground or the field. يبقى we have this local communities, we have this humanitarian organization, we have the ground or the field that we are going to transport all the goods or all the aids to this area. يعني الfield is the area that we are going to work at. طيب يبقى احنا now we have three main terminologies. I tried to make these three terminologies as clear as possible to understand what this rule is talking about. The rule is talking about what? The local community is self-reliant, can depend on itself only for 48 hours after the disaster. يعني if an earthquake occurred in a city, it damaged wide areas of the cities, as we are going to see some of the earthquakes. The people who are living in the city are self-reliant only for 48 hours. They can find their food, their medical supplies, their drinking water only for 48 hours. What about after these 48 hours? After these 48 hours, all these three will be depleted. What I mean by depleted? Will be consumed because they have a damage. No production is occurring in the city to replenish these three material or goods. And during the disaster, due to this earthquake, they don't get any outside supplies. That mandates that humanitarian organization must gather, ship, build distribution centers in this city in 48 hours to be operational maximum after 48 hours. Maximum after 48 hours. تخيل, or try to imagine this. You want to know what goods to ship the goods, build warehouses inside this suffering city, start distribution channel inside this city, only in 48 hours. Of course, this is a very challenge. It's very challenging decisions to be taken here. And all these decisions are logistics decisions. That's why we called it humanitarian logistics. You want to build as if you want to build the whole supply chain in 48 hours. How to do this? This what we are going to try to learn during our course. Any questions? حد عنده سؤال؟ This on the right here, this is the uh, 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 logistics definition, the normal definition of logistics. Logistics is that part of supply chain, the processes that plan, implement, control, efficient and effective forward and reverse flow, blah, 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 blah. This is the normal definition of supply chain. Many people depend on this definition. I think you have seen this definition in logistics course and supply chain courses. Many people try to take this definition as a base to define whatever they want to define in logistics. Yani we took it as a base in reverse logistics, for example, and we instead of having between the point of origin to the point of consumption, from the point of consumption to the point of origin to generate value instead of مش عارف ايه يعني بنعمل على بعض عليه بعض الايه المodifications. The same as here. Here they make it the definition of humanitarian logistics, the process of here. It's not a supply chain process. This is the first thing to notice. It's not a supply chain process. We are going to understand why they didn't say it's for example, a relief supply chain or an aid supply chain process. No, it's not a process of the supply chain. It's a process of planning, implementing, and controlling. The same here: planning, implement, and control. يبقى هنا same. Efficient and cost effective. يعني almost the same, because some newer definitions here added to effectiveness, cost effective. So it's the same. Efficient, flow and storage of goods. Also storage, flow and storage of goods and materials. يبقى دي a new addition. As well as information. ماشي. As well as information. They removed services. طيب. From the point of origin to the point of consumption. From the point of origin to the point of consumption. For the purpose of alleviating suffering from vulnerable people. هنا for the purpose in order to meet customers' requirement في business logistics. Here in humanitarian, the main purpose is to alleviate suffering from vulnerable people. As we discussed, there are people in suffering, people facing vulnerabilities. I want to elevate. Elevate means to remove the suffering from these people. Let's return why the added material to the definition. Here we are not only shipping for the consumers, for the consumption. I ship for the same consumption area goods, finished goods, and maybe raw material. In in business logistics, the same consumer either to have finished goods or the same consumer either to have a finished goods or have to purchase raw material. If your consumer is a factory, they will not get a finished goods from you. They will get raw material. If your consumer is a consumer end user, they will get only finished goods. But here the beneficiary, the people who is in vulnerability, they may need both. They need goods, finished goods, and they need raw material. And of course, anything between them. So you want to distinguish, not distinguish, you want to highlight this crucial difference. In the same shipment, you will have finished goods, you will have equipments, you will have raw material. Finished goods, we are talking about packed food, for example, or packed medication, adwaya. Equipment, maybe you are talking about building equipment or talking about medical equipment. Raw material, we are talking about bricks, cement, wood, iron. All of these may be packed in the same container. You will find this diversity of products in the same shipment. You may not face it or may not see it in business logistics. You will only see it in humanitarian logistics. This high diversity. You will find tents, you will find the bricks, you will find X-ray, medical X-ray devices, you will find medical laboratory devices, you will find building equipment, you will find protective gears, you will find blankets, you will find a wide variety of goods may be shipped together. That's why they said it's not only finished goods you are going to ship to the people who are in vulnerabilities, but you may have to ship many goods in this for the people who are living in these vulnerabilities. طيب. حد عنده سؤال؟ Any question till now? Okay. طيب. Why they eliminated the services يعني in the supply in the humanitarian logistics definition you will find they didn't use the word services. Let's remind you what we mean by services in business logistics and what's meant by services in business logistics. Mainly two types of services, which are financial services, accounting and something like this, and insurance services and legal services. These are the main three services you need in business logistics. In humanitarian, you may still need this three types of services, because there is some, as we are going to see in humanitarian, also there is in finances flow. In normal supply chain, there is a finances flow. In normal logistics, there is finances flow. A payment that is paid by the customers must flow back and forth. For example, I still need financial services. I still need legal services. I'm going to ship, I have to have some contracts and مش عارف ايه in the shipping, and I still needs insurance services. The need of these services is much less. Why? Because the consumer, in this case, in humanitarian logistics, are not paying anything to you. So he will not sign a contract with you. You need these services for yourself, not to regulate the relation between you and the consumer. واخدين بالكم ولا مش واخدين بالكم من دي؟ You need, of course, you're going to need these services, but it's not to regulate the relation between you and the consumer, because the consumer will pay nothing. In humanitarian logistics, you are giving your services, your products for the consumers for free. You are not charging the consumer with anything. So there is no contractual relation between you and the consumer who will get the material at the end. So the need of these services is different. That's why they didn't put it in the definition. انت في الاخر الناس اللي انت بتبعت لهم الحاجات دي مش هتحاسبهم على الماتيريال اللي انت اديتها لهم، ده انت بتديها لهم ببلاش، فري. ده اختلاف رهيب زي ما هنشوف في الفلو حتى. يعني we are saying that in normal supply chain or in normal logistics we have three flows: goods, material, information, and finances. Also in humanitarian we have the same three flows, but the flow schemes are totally different. شكل الفلو is totally different from business logistics to humanitarian logistics. We are going to discuss in maybe it may take us a little less than one lecture, but we are going to discuss the type of flow in humanitarian logistics for finances, for information, and for goods. حد عنده سؤال؟ Any questions? This is an important comparison between humanitarian relief supply chain. There are two things we are going to talk about as if they are the same till we know the difference between them. There is a difference between humanitarian logistics and relief supply chain or aid supply chain or humanitarian supply chain. But for the sake of discussion till now, we are going to consider as if they are the same, the humanitarian logistics and humanitarian relief supply chain, as if they are the same thing, because there is a lot of resemblance between them. And then we will discuss what is the differences between these two types or these two definitions. Right. الكوميرشال سبلاي تشين it's the normal supply chain يعني we know it, the business supply chain. Here we are discussing the difference between these two along these. طبعا هنا يبقى ده humanitarian relief supply chain or humanitarian logistics. The main goal, the strategic goal of commercial supply chain: maximize profit, high customer satisfaction. You have studied in the supply chain course that the main two objectives of the supply chain is either to be efficient. Efficient means minimizing cost, which is maximizing profit also, or to be responsive, which means to satisfy the customer. So these are the main differences between the main goals, strategic goals of the supply chain. In green supply chain, for example, we added environment. In sustainable, we added some social aspects. Type. In humanitarian, you'll see in humanitarian supply chain or in humanitarian logistics, the objective is totally different. Minimize loss of life. We want to minimize loss of life, to elevate suffering, to help people that are in suffering. It's totally different. We are talking about something totally different. This is the strategic goals. The strategic goals in commercial supply chain is totally different. Here we are not thinking about the cost. We are not thinking about customer satisfaction. We are thinking about how to minimize the loss of life, the number of dead people due to a disaster, how to minimize this. And those people who are affected by the disaster, how to help them. It's totally different strategic goal between the humanitarian relief supply chain and commercial supply chain, between the humanitarian logistics and, of course, business logistics. Type. This is the goal. What about some operational systems we have? Actually, this demand pattern, the difference in demand pattern, will cause these three differences. What is the difference in demand pattern? طبعا, when we talked about commercial supply chain, we talked about demand. We said we have unstable demand, we have stochastic demand, we have unpredicted demand, we have it's relative. يعني ايه it's relative؟ العملية عملية في الآخر نسبية. يعني ايه الكلام ده؟ The demand in commercial supply chain compared to the demand in humanitarian supply chain or humanitarian logistics, we can consider it's much more stable. In commercial supply chain, the demand is much more stable and predictable. يعني مثلا something from the highest variability demands, مثلا automotive industry. We can predict that. For example, in Egypt, I can predict that around 130, 150, the number between 130,000 or 150,000 cars will be sold in Egypt in 2021. It's high variability to have this margin of 20,000 vehicles to be sold in Egypt. New, طبعا we are talking about new vehicles, يعني it's relatively high. But when we compare this variability, which may be 5 or 10% from the maybe around 15% of the total demand, the variability is 15% of the total demand. When you compare this by the demand in humanitarian logistics or humanitarian supply chain, we called it a high variable, unpredictable. In terms of what? Timing. يعني ايه الكلام ده? At any time a disaster could occur. At any time, I don't know when, a demand could occur due to the disaster. People who are living in or working in humanitarian organization, today we have an earthquake in Chile. Suddenly we have a demand in Chile. The location of the demand. After 1 month, we have an earthquake in Pakistan. We have a demand in Pakistan. The location. I don't know when the demand will happen. I don't know where the location is happening. At least if I'm talking about automotive, I know the main markets. I know the locations. And I have and I know the timing. It will be distributed all over the year. I have some imagination about in commercial supply chain, about the size of the demand. I talked about in the automotive demand in Egypt, between 130,000 to 150,000. So the size is still, we know. Here, I don't know the size. It will be totally different if the earthquake is, happened in Pakistan. If it's 6 on Richter scale, the intensity of the earthquake is 6 on Richter scale, from having an earthquake 7, from having an earthquake 7.5, it's totally different. 7 till 7.5, it's totally different. The size of the demand will be totally different. I don't know the demand, when the demand will occur, or where the demand will occur, or the demand will be by how much. Also, I don't know the type of the demand. Because if the disaster is an earthquake, I will know that I have to, for example, I will have to face injuries, for example. I will have to face that people will be under ruins, and I must get them from under ruins. So I will need some equipment to remove ruins and get people from under ruins. And It's type of demand. But if it's a flood, I will not have injuries, maybe. But I need to ship clean water. I need to ship, for example, some pumps to pull water out of the people's houses, whatever. And we'll discuss this later. Yeah. So according to the type of the disaster, it will generate different type of demand. If it's a volcano, for example, I need some people who have breathing difficulties. I need medication for them. I may not have some injuries, but may I have some burns. Each disaster will generate different type of demand. Yeah, but I don't know the time of the demand in humanitarian logistics, or the location, or the type of the demand, or the size. It's much, much, much more difficult demand to deal with. يبقى all we talk about in commercial supply chain, we talk the demand is variable, we talk about the demand is stochastic, we talk that it's not compared to humanitarian, to the demand type in humanitarian logistics. طيب الdistribution network طبعا due to the demand in supply chain is stable and predictable, I have a well-defined methods. I can do some calculation to define the number and location of distribution centers. I designed the supply chain. In inventory control, I have well-defined based on lead time, demand, and target customer levels. Information system, I can use a holistic technology and advanced technology. Everything here is well-defined. I can use a well-defined systems and well-defined methods in defining the inventory and all this stuff. Here, it's a challenging due to unknowns. As we discussed here, I have a lot of unknowns. Unknowns about the timing, unknowns about the location, the type, and the size of the demand. In addition to these unknowns, I have unknowns about the politics and the culture. Because if I went to a foreign country to work at, I'm working in a different culture. I'm working under a different political regime. So I may have some trouble working with this. We are going to give some examples about humanitarian organizations who faced difficulties due to working in different culture or in different political environments. Of course, and we have the last, what we called it, a last mile consideration in the distribution network. As we see at the beginning of this lecture, the roads or bridges may be damaged due to the disaster. Roads are flooded. I cannot reach to the last mile, to the people who are surrounded in this suffering or something like that. The same in inventory. It's also challenging. I want to have a very short lead time, 48 hours to be operational on ground. And I'm dealing with a totally high diverse goods and material. And due to this diversity of goods and material, I have high variation in lead time. Some goods and material was going to be supplied in 1 week. Some will be supplied in 1 month, in 2 weeks. So it causes a challenge here, the inventory control. Of course, we are going to discuss the inventory control more when we are talking about the some of the how to be prepared to face the environment, to face the challenge. Any question till now before we discuss the information and the performance measure systems? Information is often unreliable, incomplete, and sometimes it's non-existent. In Haiti, it's an island in the Pacific in the Pacific Ocean, في المحيط الباسيفيكي الهادي. An earthquake occurred in Haiti. I think it was in 2012 or something like that. The government, the capital of Haiti is a city called Port-au-Prince. Port-au-Prince, almost the whole city is damaged in this earthquake. It's estimated around 300,000 deaths occur in this earthquake. When foreign relief agencies start to come to Port-au-Prince to help the government in getting things to people or recover the people, retrieve people from under the ruins of the damaged building, the government started to give them false information about which areas are most damaged. It's unreliable information. They faced another thing. There is no mobile networks or internet working in the city. All the information infrastructure is damaged. So even people outside Port-au-Prince cannot communicate easily with the crews working on the ground. It's non-existent. The information is non-existent. Usually there is a difficult. طبعا we are going to discuss this case later بتاعت Port-au-Prince يعني, but there is a difficulty in information flow. Sometimes we have no information. We have no information infrastructure. يعني تخيل كده لو شبكات المحمول في مصر الأربعة وقعوا لمدة يومين, الناس هتكلم بعض ازاي؟ In disasters, usually that happens. There is no information on the ground. There is no communication on the ground. Why? Because there is no communication infrastructure. خلاص الناس هتكلم بعض ازاي؟ So IT is طبعا NGO اللي هو non-governmental organization. IT is not consistent. It must have to be transparent. Why? We are going to discuss, of course, this later. طيب. The last thing we want to say, since the strategic goals are different, of course, the performance measures must be different. Here we are talking about rate on investments, turnover rates, inventory turnover rate, customer satisfaction, something like that. We talk about either financial or customer satisfaction performance. But here, the performance time to respond to the disaster. Is it we exceeded this threshold of 48 hours or not, for example? This is one of the ability to meet needs. How many people I saved? How many people get benefited from the relief that I sent? All this can be considered one of the humanitarian performance measures. How many people I saved? How many people I make? How many meals, for example? Hot meals I served in some cases. How many tents I've built? How many blankets I've distributed? How many people I've treated? All these are measures for the different humanitarian organizations. Of course, when we talk about the humanitarian organizations, the type and all this stuff, we may discuss how you can select which one of this performance measure to be your measure. Any question? حد عنده سؤال؟ طيب، خلاص احنا يعني هنكتفي بالكلمتين اللي احنا قلناهم، ونكمل المرة الجاية. أنا لسه ما نزلتش كشوفات الغياب، فهنبتدي ناخد الغياب من المرة الجاية إن شاء الله. أشوفكم الأسبوع الجاي إن شاء الله. أوكي، سلام.